Welcome into the Dynasty After Party. As always, my name is Michael Sicoli, joined here at Club Fantasy FFL, and we are so lucky. We're so lucky. We're so lucky that we have an amazing guest joining us today. We have Nate Polvogt joining us in just a little bit. Talk about the Senior Bowl. Love the Senior Bowl for our Dynasty analysis. It's where we find our studs, the Puka Nakuas of the world, and we love our Puka Nakuas of the world. So, we're going to be getting all into that. We had the Super Bowl last week, first Sunday without football. We're going to make sure it's not that sad for you this morning. We're going to be diving into all that and more right here on the Dynasty After Party. All righty. Here we are. Thank you for joining us, Nate Polvogt. As always, I have my co-host, Joel Wirth, on the bottom here. How we all doing? Joel, how are you doing? How are you doing? You look fantastic.
I'm okay. It's kind of withdrawal kicking in, but yeah, doing all right.
See, I'm trying to keep the energy high. Otherwise, it gets us. Otherwise, that withdrawal gets us. It drags us down. But obviously,
we're in the prospect season, so that's almost as good as the regular season. So yeah, it's fired up.
That's true, and there's no one better to talk about prospect season than our amazing Nate here, the baller, the shot caller. How you doing today, Nate?
I'm doing wonderful, guys. Thanks so much for having me. I'm stoked to talk about the Senior Bowl. It was an interesting experience, and I came out of it with, I think, some differing opinions from a lot of other people who looked at this class. So I'm excited to dig down into it, man.
Yeah, and every year I think the Senior Bowl has grown in popularity, in coverage, and the importance. And in doing so, it allows better prospects to go to the Senior Bowl that may not have in years past. You know, we got to look at Michael Penix, that, you know, guy that had the college end that he did years ago. I don't think he goes to the Senior Bowl. This year is a little bit different. So awesome to see, and we get some great first-person perspective from you, Nate. And before we jump into all that, I want to give you a chance to shout out all your stuff, where people can find you, where people can follow you, because you do amazing work.
So you can find me on Twitter at Nate Polvogt, as you see right there. You can find my work at Razzball. We've got Dynasty Diehards, which is every Friday live on the Razzball YouTube channel, as well as the Dynasty Diehards YouTube channel, at FF Dino Diehards on Twitter. You can find my writing mostly featured at FantasyPros at this point in the offseason. And then I just joined IDP Guys, so I'm going to be around doing a couple shows. I've got some articles going. So I'm all over the place, man, just hustling, talking football.
Now that's the type of guest we like having on, you know, is the hustlers. Because Joel down there, I don't know how much you know Joel, but Joel's a hustler. Joel hustles. I don't know. I honestly don't have basis for that, but it feels you possess a hustler energy.
I'm a hustler in my real job, so yeah, I guess.
It's a compliment. It's not a diss. You know, if you ever
I appreciate that.
Joel, you know, a fourth isn't going to cut it. You know, a fourth ain't going to add over the bar. He wants that.
That is true.
He wants
you got that right.
Love it.
Now, before we jump into the Senior Bowl and those lovely prospects that we love so much, Super Bowl. We did have the Super Bowl last week, didn't we? Didn't we, gentlemen?
We sure did.
Lackluster 3 quarters, fantastic fiery finish of a fourth. Nate, we'll start with you because Joel and I talked a little bit about it before last Sunday morning. So, what were your takeaways from the Super Bowl? You enjoy it? You learn anything?
As a Broncos fan, no, I did not enjoy the Chiefs winning yet again. But I think what I took away from the Super Bowl, the play wasn't great. From a fantasy perspective, a dynasty perspective, there wasn't a whole lot to glean from this, right? I mean, it's the Super Bowl. Things are different. It's different gameplay, different strategy. It's the last game of the season. But what I did take from it is, even though I'm a Broncos fan and it pains me, we are watching greatness with Patrick Mahomes. So just appreciate that. Because seriously, we're so incredibly lucky to go Tom Brady to Patrick Mahomes as football fans. There are generations that didn't get to see this quality of play. So enjoy it because it's great. And what Mahomes is doing, we may never see again.
And as a Broncos fan, you can relate to it even more. But why is this happening in the AFC again? Yeah, I'm a Steeler fan, which you can see that happen.
Well, as you see my Steelers shoes here, got from the Pittsburgh airport. I'm a low-key pretty big Steelers fan too, have been since like the early 90s. I don't know, man. But the AFC has been the dominant division. We're the dominant conference. And for us other team AFC fans, not Chiefs fans, it sucks kind of. But dude, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are special. So as much as it sucks as a Broncos fan and knowing that we might as well just take a nap for the next 5 to 7 years, I'm going to appreciate watching it because it's football greatness.
It is so much fun to watch. Easy B saying, what's up? Good to see you again, Easy. And thank God that the 49ers lost. You know, I actually agree with that, believe it or not. But Joel, our resident NFC perspective, what were your thoughts on last week's Super Bowl?
Yeah, you guys probably aren't old enough to remember the dominance of like the NFC East and the Cowboys and the 49ers in the late 80s and early 90s.
No, it wasn't born.
That I had to live through. So
I had to live through it too. I grew up on that's the football I grew up on. That and the Broncos losing 3 Super Bowls by like 100 points.
So yeah, I think we called it last week, right? We said I'm not betting against Patrick Mahomes, and I said Chris Jones would be the low-key MVP. Obviously, the quarterback's always going to win if they don't outright suck. So, and Mahomes was obviously quite good, deserved it. But Chris Jones was the reason they didn't lose. I mean, he was incredibly impactful on the defensive end. Yep. Be interesting to see where he ends up, if they can actually re-sign him or bring him back. Because he's extremely important to their defense. I've heard some rumbling that the Bears were going to try and sign him. So as a Packer fan, I'm very anti that. But yeah, I think you nailed it too, Michael. It's that the game was pretty lousy for the first 3 quarters. It was really boring. It was, kind of shades of the New England Rams Super Bowl of a few years ago. It wasn't really interesting at all. And then kind of kicked into high gear at the end. So yeah, it was decent Super Bowl. Not going to rank in the all-time greats, but the quarterback will.
And in some way, if I can get symbolic, thoughtful about it, what's the word? Philosophical. This year's Super Bowl really did reflect this year so well, right? We didn't have a front runner. We didn't have that dominant football. Maybe you saw it at times with the 49ers, but I really think that or maybe the Ravens at times, but every team had a slip up at this point in the season where you looked at them and you said, that team, it's not the juggernaut. You had at least 1 point with all those teams. And I think the Super Bowl at least reflected that in some way of imperfect football, but finding a way to win regardless. And that's what champions do. That's what Patrick Mahomes does. To the shock of absolutely none of us for the next 10 years. And there's no hope in the AFC for Nate and I. It's fine. At least I know my team is terrible. It's a little bit easier to stomach. The only other thing I want to bring up from the Super Bowl here would be Super Bowl MVP, Juwan Jennings.
Dude.
Great game for Juwan Jennings. Listen, he's a restricted free agent. It's going to be interesting to see what tag they put on him, because they're not going to let him walk for nothing. They'll probably put a first, second round tender on him or something like that. But is there any market for Juwan Jennings?
So, no, probably not really.
I know.
But I was on with Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey Thursday before the Super Bowl. And I said, this is the kind of game where a guy like Juwan Jennings wins MVP. You just watch. He's going to have himself a game. And Mike Dempsey and Bob Harris said, you're crazy. That'll never happen.
Fair enough.
And then when he threw that touchdown pass, I DM'd Bob Harris. I said, Juwan Jennings. And man, if they'd won that game, he might have won MVP. And then I would have looked really good. Wide receiver 3 against a defense that can't cover wide receiver 3s. The Chiefs showed it all season. They have a hard time with that third wide receiver. It just made sense they were going to go to Jennings. But I think he upped his stock in free agency. I think he'll get a good deal. I think he'll find a team that'll be like, well, you can be a wide receiver too. That might be Carolina. That might be Washington. I can see him like slotting in behind Terry McLaurin, like, hey, he can be our 2. Maybe this will help Sam Howell. Is it going to play out well for him? Probably not.
Nate, what's going on, Nate? Joel, what? Listen, Joel. I know we've been doing a show for well over 6 months at this point. I just want you to forgive me for that small.
It's all good.
But your thoughts on Juwan Jennings, because I feel like you're a much more avid doubter.
Yeah, no, I zero interest. I'm not carrying him on any dynasty rosters. I can't imagine he's relevant at any point. So Nate nailed it. Somebody might give him a shot, but he's not a good enough player to deserve any kind of volume.
1 year, $8 million with the Panthers if somehow he got to walk. But yeah, we're gonna see the Panthers send a first-round pick through the tender. Oh man, how amazing would that be? Just to think about it. But either way, that kind of wraps up the Super Bowl. There isn't honestly too much to talk about. Patrick Mahomes things, and we dove into that. Either way, Senior Bowl. Let's jump right to it. Nate, you were on the ground. How first off, I want to ask about the experience and atmosphere of the Senior Bowl. What was that like for you? Yeah, try to put me there. I'm curious.
So, I mean, this is my first experience covering any sort of event credentialed. So that was, I mean, my first day walking in, it was very surreal just being there and being on the field. Had the opportunity to actually be on the field for 11 on 11s on Tuesday, which was I was 5 feet from Mike Tomlin. So that was pretty cool. I'll tell you what, being able to see these guys perform in person is a totally different feel than watching them on film. You see things and you're able to sit there and talk to all of these other scouts and analysts who are looking for the same things. So it's kind of a group analysis where you're able to talk through things with other people. Learned a lot about these quarterbacks, learned a lot about the wide receiver class. We didn't learn a lot about tight ends this year. All in all, if you are someone who covers this sport and you are someone who does any sort of rookie content at all, you need to be at the Senior Bowl. Plain and simple. Between the players, talking to other scouts and analysts, coaches, GMs, the way that they run the drills, and seeing how these guys interact with the coaches. And we'll talk about some of these players specifically later, but there were guys who you saw where it's like you're coachable and you're not coachable, which at the NFL level, that becomes a problem for some of these guys, especially the ones who need coaching. So that was the most interesting thing, was that aspect of it, the coachability, and you got to actually see that on the field. You don't pick that up in film. So
yeah, and I think that's a very fair point, because it's a lot of things that we try to. I'm sorry, I am trying things with a layup that is just not. Either way, it's interesting because there's so much that you don't get to see on film. We only get no audio type of clips, and we get to watch someone run a route. Sometimes they run off screen, and it can be difficult if you don't get that all 22. So with all that in mind, who was Mike Tomlin looking at? Please tell me right now who he's going to take.
I have no idea. But he did. Apparently, this is a thing he does every year at the Senior Bowl. He shows up. He's one of the few coaches who is on the field who wants to be a part of the drills, and he'll take over a drill or two, even though he's not supposed to. He took over a couple one-on-one drills this year and was like barking orders at a couple of receivers. He kind of had a thing for Tez Walker out of UNC, but I think that thing for Tez Walker faded by Thursday. So I think he saw what he saw and he didn't like it, if we're being honest.
Let's note it down. But now the big noise that came out, and Joel, feel free to jump in at any time as well. I don't want to not have you ask these questions as well because you thought of them, but
no, just real quick. So I think that's a really interesting point that Nate brought up. What did you see that made you think some of these guys would not be coachable? Was it just kind of stubbornness or not listening? Or kind of expand on that.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
I suppose there were guys who were very coachable. Michael Pratt out of Tulane, the quarterback, he came across as very coachable. Brendan Rice took a lot of direction over the 3 days of practice, even though he did not show up for the game. Bo Nix didn't really take a lot of coaching. He didn't seem to be listening to what the coaches were telling him to be more effective in the pocket. He was having a hard time with his feet. He just didn't seem to, not that he wasn't listening, that he couldn't put it together and put it into practice on the field, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And it's interesting for someone like Bo Nix, who's obviously been around the college game and around the coaching room for quite some time.
Right.
And now he's going to be transitioning to an NFL game. And that's a substantially different atmosphere. A lot of people have a lot of questions about people like Bo Nix. And
who were the coaching staffs this year?
It was Tomlin
and
Ulbrich, right, from the Jets.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'd have to go back and look at my list. That's a lot to ask somebody to remember, Joel. I wish I could. I've got my spreadsheet up here with all of my notes from the Senior Bowl. So, but no coaches. But I do have kickers.
Oh, Joel. Joel's the biggest kicker guy in fantasy. Like outside of maybe Linda, maybe.
Oh, definitely. Well, Linda's the biggest. I'll tell you what, dude. Will Reichard from Alabama, that kid has one of the biggest legs I have ever seen in person. And I was at the Broncos game when Jason Elam kicked the 63-yarder to tie the NFL record. And I'm telling you, Rashard has a bigger leg than that. It's insane. This kid's going to be like a Justin Tucker type asset in the NFL.
Clip it. We'll do that,
dude.
Yeah. And what's it called? Maybe Joel needs a new kicker. Over.
I was going to say, as a Packer fan, I'm making a mental note of that because that didn't go so well this year. So.
Yeah. Oh, Mason Crosby was my boy for a long time. CU represent.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a sad end to that career, man. He's
right.
But
it's the Robbie Gould path, right? You just can't kick off. Yeah. You can't kick anything over 45 yards. It's the way it goes.
It just happens sometimes. Matt Bryant.
Hey, me too.
Not me. But if we were just talking about Bo Nix and what he could end up being, and there were a lot of reports that suggested that Bo Nix had a down senior week, as well as Michael Penix, and Michael Penix being the bigger red flag to me personally. So I'm curious about your opinions on what you saw from those two quarterbacks. Obviously, two guys that are being talked about in the first round.
So everybody there, we were all looking for Penix and Nix to kind of show out. They showed up at the Senior Bowl to prove that they could play at the NFL level. And part of what's great about the Senior Bowl is a lot of these guys haven't played or practiced in these like NFL type schemes and these NFL type offenses. So what these coaches are trying to do is they're trying to see what they can do in a more NFL style, pro style offense. It was not good for Bo Nix and Michael Penix. Penix did the same thing he does in college. He's got happy feet. He can't stay in the pocket. And when he gets pressured, he makes bad decisions. He airs the ball out, or he throws it short, or he throws straight into like double coverage. And he got picked off a handful of times in one-on-ones because of those situations where the pressure in the pocket collapsed on him. He doesn't have the feet to get outside around the corner. And when he does get outside around the corner, he doesn't set his feet before he throws, and it gets even worse. He just showed more of that at the Senior Bowl. There was nothing impressive about Penix. Same thing with Bo Nix. He did everything we knew he could do, but he still can't get the ball downfield with accuracy. He makes bad decisions, and he's kind of I can't think of the word here. He's a liability in the pocket for an NFL team. If he doesn't have perfect blocking, if there's any sort of pressure, Nix gets rattled, and it happened to him all week. Same thing with Spencer Rattler, who won MVP of the Senior Bowl. But you looked at Spencer Rattler all week, you're like, okay, this kid's okay. He's fine. But then he'll throw two bad interceptions on back-to-back plays. And then it's just not good. None of these guys are NFL level starters. Period. Not one quarterback at the Senior Bowl. Michael Pratt might sneak into like a Derek Carr type role, where he's a game manager quarterback. But outside of that, none of these guys should be day one picks, including Bo Nix. I don't even know that Michael Penix should be a day two pick. I think that's a wasted pick for an NFL franchise. I think these are all backup level guys that came out of the Senior Bowl.
It's interesting because I've heard that opinion before about Michael Penix and how interesting, that could be after the year he had and the excitement he had to end the year prior to the actual end. But Michael Penix, I'm curious on, do you think this was a feeling on those guys you just mentioned, Penix, Nix, Pratt, all those guys? Do you think that was something that was universally shared at the Senior Bowl? Or is that something that do you think was more of your takeaway?
Everybody I have talked to, we all pretty much have agreed that Michael Pratt was the best quarterback there because he didn't make mistakes. He was consistent. He got the ball downfield. He doesn't have a big arm. He's not the most athletic guy there, but he thinks before he throws, which none of these other guys were doing. There was on 11-on-11s, and this was really telling for me with Spencer Rattler because he looked okay. He threw a pick on a slant route. Okay, you made the mistake. It was a bad throw. There's no way you should have made that. The next play, they run the exact same play. He makes the exact same throw and gets picked off in the exact same way. 2 plays in a row. That tells me you're not ready for the NFL, bub.
And that feels
If you're
so
gonna make
familiar. That feels so familiar with Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, exactly. None of these guys have done anything to be exciting. And I think that was what was so disappointing about this, especially with Nix and Penix, because we wanted to see more from them and we just simply didn't get it. And every scout, analyst, NFL type that was there was just really disappointed in their overall performance.
And
so that's interesting what you said. Is I like my take on those two guys specifically was they were going to be kind of guys who would probably deserve to go in the second round, but you might see a team kind of trade up into the back end of the first round to get that extra 50-year option. So you don't think those guys are even worth taking at that point, let alone round 2, day 2?
Bo Nix, maybe, if he can find the right situation. But that right situation is Bo Nix goes to the back end of the first round and he gets to sit for a couple of years and fine tune and hone and learn the speed of the NFL game. I don't think there's any hope for Michael Penix, to be honest. I don't think he's got it. I think he was a 5th-year senior. If he was going to get
like
there, he would have gotten there. Yeah, exactly. The same thing was one of the quarterback I was most excited to see was Joe Milton out of Tennessee because he's got that like Anthony Richardson type of athleticism. The dude can't make a short throw to save his life.
That's why Tennessee wasn't exactly the winner that it wanted to be.
Yeah.
I just had thought that it went in and out. And as for, I had it before, but outside of the quarterbacks, we've talked a lot about the quarterbacks, but I'm curious on who else stood out for you. Maybe at the running backs, Marshawn Lloyd being someone I've watched a few interviews. I've seen a lot of people talk to him, and he was certainly seemed to be a riser at the Senior Bowl.
So we all knew what Marshawn Lloyd was capable of as a runner. They just didn't use him in the passing game all that much at USC. The whole point of him even showing up to the Senior Bowl was to show that he could succeed in that pass catching role. He spent 3 days proving that and was a phenomenal interview. Great guy to talk to, a lot of heart, he's very humble, would be the best way to put it. He's going to be a star in the NFL. He showed what he needed to show over those 3 days. He did not show up for the game on Saturday. Can't blame him. There's no reason for him to play. We all saw what we needed to see out of Marshawn Lloyd. And it wasn't necessarily unexpected, but 3 running backs that were there that I was just endlessly impressed with that I think really up their draft stock. Kamani Vidal out of Troy was impressed. He's tiny. He's 5'8", but he's 215, real stout guy. He showed he can do pretty much everything against these bigger guys. He slips through holes well with his size. He's sneaky. His footwork at the line is incredible. He has a really good vision. And then Cody Schrader from Missouri, 5'9", 214, about the same size as Vidal. But he showed he can be an inside runner and he can cut the edge. I think he probably got himself into the 3rd round at the Senior Bowl. In Missouri, SEC school, tough competition. I think he was a little bit slept on because Mizzou's kind of, let's be honest, they're the basement of the SEC, right? And then Amani Bailey out of TCU. And oddly, he didn't really show out a ton in practice. We didn't see a whole lot from him. He was there, he was efficient, but he didn't do anything flashy. But then on Saturday, at the end of the game, interception, guys running it back, and I can't remember the name of the cornerback. It was an impressive interception, an impressive run back. Amani Bailey hunts that guy down from 20 yards behind and tackles him at the 2-yard line, saves a touchdown. We were actually hanging out with Amani Bailey's family when that happened. So we had been talking to them about him. And that heart right there, what he did on that last play, coaches saw that. And they saw a kid who is maybe undersized, but has the heart on a play that didn't matter. He didn't need to chase that guy down. And those are the things at the Senior Bowl that some of these guys do, where Bailey wasn't great in practice, but dude, in the game, he showed heart. He probably got himself into the 5th round. So those were the 3 guys really, I think, that really upped their stock running back wise at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, and that's great to know, because I think the big consensus with this class, and I'm curious in your thoughts as well, Joel, about it, and I've been seeing this circling around Twitter over the last week, is, we don't have the Bijan Robinson, we don't have the Saquon Barkley, we don't have the star, and therefore it kind of makes the class feel weak. but I've seen a lot of people pushing back on that recently. And I don't know if we're just trying to talk ourselves into it or not, but people pushing back and saying, no, we just have to dig a little bit deeper. It's not easy, but there are talents in this class. I'm curious if that's something you agree with, or if it is just a weaker year.
Oh, I think you just have to dig deep. I think every year can be considered weak or strong. And the years where we think it's a strong class ends up being a crap class. Years where we thought it's been a weak class, it's ended up being a really good running back class. I think you have to go deep with this class, but there are guys who are going to have value. I mean, we're not going to have a Breece Hall out of this class. We're not going to have a Todd Gurley out of this class, but we're going to have some decent guys.
I miss Todd Gurley.
Me too.
Yeah, I think Nate hit the nail on the head. Is that we don't have the top end on this class, right? You don't have a Breece Hall or a Bijan, and especially with Travion Henderson not coming out, I think that kind of takes what was kind of the perceived top prospect out of the class. And like my RB1 is Jonathan Brooks. He tore his ACL late in this kind of mid-season, so we getting kind of word that he may do okay on his medicals and maybe ready for training, at least ready to practice at training camp. We'll see how that goes. But I don't think it's as bad as we thought. One question I would ask you on Marshawn Lloyd is, and I know you talked about the pass receiving. I think he's a very good runner. I like him a lot. My question on him is the pass protection, because he seems pretty bad. Did you get any indication that that's not going to be a problem at the pro level?
No, it's going to be a problem at the pro level, but NFL teams are good enough at masking that kind of stuff. They just won't ask him to do pass pro. I don't think if he's on the field for a pass down, I think he's going to be running routes because he'll be a liability in the backfield. They'll have to find someone else to do that. But I mean, maybe he learns at the NFL level. I think we have to remember that any player can get better with the right coaching. It's all about situation. Jamarcus Russell could have been great if he'd been with the right organization. The Raiders were the worst fit possible for that guy because they weren't going to hold him accountable.
And to that point, like a guy we're all very familiar with, like Aaron Jones, like couldn't stay on the field his rookie year because he was getting Aaron Rodgers killed. Like I remember a specific play, I think it was against Houston, where he just whiffed on a block and almost got Rodgers literally murdered on the fields. And he immediately came off and never played in the game again. He's turned himself into a fairly decent pass protector. So it like you said, it can get better with the right coaching. You just need the right situation.
Exactly.
Some guys got it. And on the mention of Todd Gurley, I can't help but think of exactly that, right? Of what Todd Gurley had and what he was prior. With I'm blanking on his name. I can picture his face. Someone help me here. We got the mustache. We all know who we're talking about here.
Oh, Jeff Fisher.
Yeah, Jeff Fisher. Thank you. With Jeff Fisher before Sean McVay, Todd Gurley, while a good player, was certainly not the player that we wanted because he just wasn't used correctly. So yeah, these landing spots certainly mattered. I think sometimes we have to keep that in mind when we're feeling so good about prospects that these landing spots really do matter quite a bit. Shout out to my Brian Edwards love. I can't play landing spots. I don't think, but maybe John Gruden. But did anyone else catch your eye at running backs? Because actually, you know what, we got a good question with Easy here. We'll pull up right there from the chat. Are you guys seeing any first rookie running backs taken somewhere early, second, or with the Senior Bowl showing are they inching into the first round of? I think he's basically asking, do you see any first round rookie running backs in rookie drafts?
No. You shouldn't be taking any of these guys in the first round. No. My love for the guys that I just talked about is like third round grade love, to be fair.
Yeah.
They're guys that you can get later that they could be really good, but you don't want to be taking them in the first or second round of your rookie drafts.
And I think that's something that Joel and I would be echoing regardless, but go on.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to hit the receivers in a minute. Like, this is a historically good wide receiver class. Like, so there are going to be receivers at the back end of your first round of rookie drafts who should go well before any running back. Just like you said, there isn't the high side to this running back class. There isn't, the elite tier, and this wide receiver class is just stacked. So
it's stacked.
Yeah, there should not be. Especially when you move into Superflex, there should not be any running backs going in the first and probably the top half of the second, to be honest.
Yep.
And I think that's probably how it'll play out. But let's jump into that stacked wide receiver class. Let's do just that. You got the greats. You got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Malik Neighbors, you got Rome Dunze, and you got the star of the Senior Bowl, Lad McConkey, everybody. Oh, here we go.
My Lord and Savior.
I have not come up. I have not decided whether I am pro McConkey or not pro McConkey. I know Joel here is very anti McConkey.
I'm not anti. Let's preface this. I like Lad McConkey. Like on Twitter this week, I said his ceiling is good. Adam Thielen, like the good years in Minnesota. And I hate that all his comps are white guys, but it's the way it is.
I mean,
but I'm seeing him get pushed into like the first round of mocks and
that's
NFL mocks, and he's probably he's like a third round guy, but he's getting way pushed up. So your take on McConkey and what he did at the Senior Bowl, because there was a lot of steam coming out of that.
You're not going to like my comp at all. Looking at my notes here, it's football Jesus. I am so in love with Lad McConkey. I liked him heading into the Senior Bowl, and then I watched him in action and the way that he just tricks defenders. He has no problem pushing them where he wants them to go with his route running, with his footwork. If he needs that defender inside, he'll make sure they're inside. If he needs that defender outside, he puts them outside. They gave him too much room day one. They gave him a lot of cushion when they were running one-on-ones at 11-on-11s. They were giving like 5 yards at the line. They tightened that up on Wednesday, and he had a hard time early. Then he adjusted his footwork and his hand chucking at the line, and he started beating that tight press coverage as well. I don't know that there's anything he can't do. I'm not going to comp him to Adam Thielen or football Jesus because that was ridiculous. But what I will comp him to, I think he's a Wes Welker, Julian Edelman type guy. He's going to work well over the middle of the field. He's going to trick defenders, and he's got that sneaky footwork where he can get away once he has the ball and he can get back downfield. Saw him break a lot of tackles he probably shouldn't have been breaking, and he reads coverage really well. And that became very apparent in 11-on-11s. He was finding soft spots in zone, and he understood when he was being double covered, and he knew what he needed to do to try and break that coverage. So I don't think he should go in the first round. I think he's a second round guy in the NFL draft. But I think we're all going to be kind of blown away by what he does.
I'm so interested to dive into Lad McConkey. I'm going to be doing my best to get into doing a lot more scouting over the next week and two. I'm sure we all are ahead of the combine coming up. But with Lad McConkey, it's so interesting because he was such a terrible high school recruit. He was a 3-star. I was just looking it up now, 23rd in the state of Georgia alone at wide receiver. Yet after a redshirt year, he was an all SEC freshman. He at Georgia, this is not somewhere where, your wide receiver is going to thrive unless you're actually standing out. You're not going to, Georgia can win using Brock Bowers. They can use George Pickens. They can use anyone they want to win. And Lad McConkey making an impact in his first year as a starter it's noticeable to me. And I don't know, maybe I might be overthinking it. Again, I haven't dove into him on film yet that much, but it's interesting. He'll be a very, very fun person to see where the NFL ranks him versus where the community ranks, because it feels like there's going to be quite a disconnect one way or another on whichever one that will be. I honestly, the only name I heard more out of the Senior Bowl than Lad McConkey was Roman Wilson, early and often hearing the name Roman Wilson. So I'm curious on how much you think he helped his stock and whether you could crawl into that, upper part of day two with how strong he was in the Senior Bowl.
I think there's a chance he ends up in Kansas City, the last pick of the first round in day one. And if that does happen, F my life as a Broncos fan. Forget about it. Roman Wilson was good. He was just as good as we all expected him to be, if not a little bit better. I think he's a little bit quicker off the line than we expected. And his secondary speed and acceleration once he gets the ball, probably the best we saw at the Senior Bowl, if we're being honest. And then he interviewed really well on media day. The kid couldn't be more humble. Just a really good, solid kid that I think a lot of front offices just will want in their locker room. But I think he goes to the Chiefs at 32, and that just terrifies me. I think he did enough at the Senior Bowl to crawl in there.
I did see Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network. Everyone knows Daniel Jeremiah at this point. Comp him to, I believe it was Deontay. No, he comp him to what he saw from Jaden Reed a year ago. And Joel and I on this show, we're quite big Jaden Reed fans, and not just because he's a Packer fan. We've been in, and now all three of us are. See, we knew we liked you, Nate, for a reason. But do you think that comp is an accurate one? Did you seemed on board?
Yeah,
with it?
Yeah, I'm on board with it. I'm 100% on board with it. Because I love Jaden Reed and I love Roman Wilson. I think they're very similar players, similar size, similar strengths. And yeah, I love that comp.
So, like, the reason I liked, and I think the NFL liked Jaden Reed more than I think people expected, was he was a smaller guy who could play outside. Does Roman Wilson have that skill set? Can he do that, like a similar thing?
Not as well as Jaden Reed can yet, but I think at the NFL level, he'll probably that's a skill I can see him working on and getting better at. He works better inside, but he's a guy I think size-wise, he's 6 foot, you can push him outside, and I don't think that's a problem.
And
barely 6 foot. He's like maybe this much taller than me. So
tippy toes on the scale type of thing.
I'll tell you what, guys, that was one of the weirdest things, was being standing next to a lot of these guys, like after practices on the field and then like media day, how tiny some of these guys are. And you look at them on TV and you're like, dude, you're huge. And then you stand next to Malachi Corley and you're like, how the hell are you the same height as me? This doesn't make sense.
All right,
I'm confused.
We're gonna clip this, send this to Malachi, and say that you called him tiny. It's perfect.
But I do. Malachi Corley is the other. Well, there are two other wide receivers I wanted to talk about. I was hoping you were going to ask me
about. Take it away.
Malachi Corley, you guys. I think he did enough to get into the first round.
Wow. Okay. Well,
a lot of comps to Deebo Samuel. A lot of comps to AJ Brown. He becomes a running back as soon as that ball is in his hands, which tracks because he started as a running back at Western Kentucky and got converted to wide receiver. 5'11", 210, and you can't tackle him. And that was he gets the ball. The first guy doesn't take him down. The second guy doesn't take him down. And usually the third guy's not taking him down because his center of gravity is so solid and he's so stout. This is a guy who is going to be phenomenal at the NFL level. His grade wasn't as good coming into the Senior Bowl because Western Kentucky. So what's the competition? But he showed out against all of these Power 5 school guys. He made defenders look silly at times in 11-on-11s and 1-on-1s. And he was just such a team player all week, helping other guys out, giving instructions, seeing things, saying things. This is a guy whose stock is through the roof for me, and it should be for most NFL executives as well.
Now, it's interesting because someone with that build and that frame, and you mentioned Deebo Samuel, I've seen that comp. I've been reading the draft profiles all the last few weeks of the Senior Bowl and so forth. And like you, like you mentioned, I haven't watched. Who watched Western Kentucky this year? Let's be honest. We're all watching that after the fact. So there's still a lot to dive into. But the one thing I hear a lot is that people get him the ball in space and then he creates them there, right? And that's what you mentioned as well. It's what he does best. But do you think his route tree is limited in that way? Do you think he's limited right now to he's a great player in space and that works, but we've seen players in space not be able to translate as receivers because they aren't able to do much downfield?
No, because on my notes, I watched him consistently win go routes.
Perfect. That's exactly what we want to hear. Yeah.
He can get open vertically. He can get open horizontally. The kid can do it all. I mean, I don't really see a lot of weaknesses in his game, and I'm really glad he got to showcase that at the Senior Bowl.
And that's what it's for. That's what Senior Bowl is for. Toronto Dave.
What up, buddy?
Oh,
the hell are you doing awake, Dave?
Oh my goodness. Oh, love the Senior Bowl. Love talking rookies. It is really fun. It is fun to get back into the off-season swing of it. And I don't know if I'm trying to convince myself of that because football's over, but I don't think I am.
So who else did you want to talk about, Nate? You said there were two guys you wanted to talk about.
Oh, Tez Walker, guys.
That's where you're going to jump to.
So we're doing one good, one bad? Is that the deal?
Yeah, that's exactly where we're going here. The guy can't get open horizontally. His footwork's iffy. His hands are terrible. And I don't like to harp on drops. Like Deontay Johnson drops the ball, but then when he catches it, it's great. The problem with Tez Walker is he's dropping balls in big situations. They're running 2-minute drills, and he can't hold on to a 3rd and 15 where he's wide open over the middle, and he just drops it. And those concentration drops bother me because that's hard to fix. If you're mentally distracted at the point of catch, that's like having the yips. And I got the yips as a pitcher in high school, and I'll tell you what, it sucks, and it's hard to get out of it. His footwork's not great. I don't think he reads defense as well. He's going to go as a day 2 pick probably. And then we're going to be talking about him and Jalen Reagor in the same sentence pretty soon.
You know what it almost reminds me of a little bit, and tell me I'm wrong because people throw out bad comps all the time, but Terrace Marshall a little bit. Somebody that is kind of over reliant on one thing that he does well, and when the other things don't come, it gets exposed in a major way. I also like throwing a jab at Joel whenever I mention Terrace Marshall.
I mean, that is a fair comp, I think. Before I saw him in person, I comped him as a slower, slightly smaller DK Metcalf. And I'll stick to that if DK Metcalf was bad at his job.
Oh, quite the distinguish.
Like, when you say concentration drops are a problem, I just go immediately to Quentin Johnson, and that's
same,
literally terrifying.
Same, yeah. I don't think there's a whole lot of future in the NFL for Tez Walker. There's a lot of chatter amongst scouts and NFL brass at the Senior Bowl that some of this stuff was going to be a major issue come draft time. So,
well, that's number 2 of Tez Walker. Who is number 3? Do you have a third name?
I'll tell you what, Luke McCaffrey was one of the nicest people there. I don't know that he's really an NFL star type, but he is a nice kid. He made some really good catches. I just don't think the size is there, and everybody wants the McCaffreys to all be Christian, and there's only one Christian, and I think he's the NFL star in that family. These guys are going to get drafted, but McCaffrey at best is a role player in the NFL, but nice kid.
Let's talk Xavier Legette real quick. What did you think of him?
I don't think he did enough to really up his stock in the draft, but his second level speed is ridiculous. I think that NFL teams are going to see that. I think he has possibly some pedigree as maybe a returner at some point, despite his size. I mean, he's big, 6'3", 227. And he's lazy in routes, which was really bothersome to watch. He can create space with his size, but he doesn't do anything with his footwork to create additional space. And he can use his size to win some of these contested catches. But I wanted to see him creating space with his footwork, with his route running, with chucking at the line, and he just didn't do any of that. He was very lazy about it. I still think he translates to a pretty talented NFL receiver. From a fantasy perspective, I think he's like a wide receiver 3 most of his career. I wouldn't expect anything more than that from him.
That's good. He's somebody that I've seen very polar opinions on. I've seen people that love him. I've seen people that hate him. And I'm curious, what do you think the majority of consensus was, if there was one, or was it really just that one side or the other? Do you think people are higher or lower on him after the Senior Bowl?
I don't think he changed anybody's minds after the Senior Bowl. I mean, I'm looking at my notes from before the Senior Bowl and nothing changed. I saw all of this play out at the Senior Bowl. I would still call him a less talented A.J. Brown light, I think, is kind of where he's at. He's one of those guys that didn't really do anything to change anybody's mind in Mobile.
And looking at this class as a whole, right? We talked about the top at the top of this part, talking about that this is a really great wide receiver class, especially when we transition away from where maybe we have a weaker running back class. Where do you think this class as a whole, this wide receiver class, is going to rank up as opposed to, what we've seen in recent years?
I'm actually honestly not sure, because there are some players. Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. He's huge, 6'7", 240. But he plays like he's that size. He's kind of a little bit awkward on the field. He doesn't move well. He's lanky. He can get up there, but he doesn't create separation. But he could get to the NFL level and be great. He's Chase Claypool with, I think, a better attitude. So if he can translate to the NFL level in the right situation, he's great, but there's so many players where they could go one way or the other, and it's going to depend on situation and attitude. And did we see enough? And what we saw, does it translate to the NFL level? There are three guys, I think, right now, outside of obviously Neighbors and Odunze and Harrison, that I think are surefire NFL guys. Lad McConkey, I think Malachi Corley, and I think Xavier Leggett. Outside of that, I don't know that guys like Brendan Rice, Jamari Thrash, I don't know that they're going to be able to succeed at the NFL level. The talent's there, but I don't know that they're ever going to be refined enough to actually succeed. So this could go either way. This could be one of the best classes we've had. This could end up being like, man, we really overrated this class of wide receivers.
Which feels like it happens too often in terms of how we view things coming in. We view the wide receiver class as a great one. We view the running back as a down one, and somehow it evens up that both end up one over one, an inch over the other.
So I put you on the spot real quick, Nate. Do you think, did you see anyone at the Senior Bowl that you think could kind of either way, like blow up their stock at the combine or kind of tank their stock at the combine? Did you see any like athleticism things that you think are going to trip some guys up, or you think you're going to push them over the top?
So I think that Johnny Wilson is a guy that could benefit from combine. I think he could really up his stock if he does well, if he shows out better than he did at the Senior Bowl. I feel the same about Michael Penix and Bo Nix. I think that they can maybe redeem themselves at the combine if they test well and if they do well in drills. And then the tight ends, I think, are the guys you're going to have to use the combine to up their stock because they didn't do anything at this Senior Bowl that excited anyone outside of AJ Barner from Michigan. He looked really good all week. But guys like Ben Sinnott, we wanted to see more from him. He looked distracted. He couldn't make catches, so he's going to have to do something at the Senior Bowl or at the combine to help himself there. Brevin Spawn-Ford out of Minnesota, who I was really excited about. He's a 6'7", 270 prospect. For a tight end, that size is amazing. Terrible hands, terrible route running. Just, he's a great blocker. He's not going to be a pass catcher at the NFL level. And it's funny, now that I'm seeing my homie Andrew Cooper there in the chat, my other tight end aficionado here. I don't know that any of these guys change anybody's minds enough at the Senior Bowl. They're walking into the combine without questions. There's still going to be a lot of questions about every single one of these guys outside of maybe Marshawn Lloyd at the combine. Spencer Rattler's going to have to do more. Michael Penix is going to have to do more. We're going to need to see Lad McConkey show that he can keep up what he was doing and that he's actually a reliable receiver and that front offices like him and that he has a good attitude. So this was an interesting Senior Bowl. And talking to a lot of people who have been in years past said that this was honestly one of the more uneventful Senior Bowls they've been to in a long time. Of course, the one I go to is uneventful. Go figure.
Go back next year. Run it back. But yeah, and let's go on to those tight ends real quick. Obviously, everyone knows Brock Bowers, but I think there's a lot of unknowns in the class outside of that.
Yeah.
Who else are you looking at as someone that you enjoy? You mentioned the Michigan kid right there, but who else do you like from this one?
Theo Johnson from Penn State was really fast. He showed out in that respect, which was great. I was really disappointed overall in the tight end play here at the Senior Bowl. I think Brock Bowers is the guy. I think he's the tight end one in this class. I don't think it's even remotely close. And behind that, everybody else is playing for second. I thought Ben Sinnott would probably be the tight end too. I'm not so sure about that now. I'm going to need to see him do something at the combine or at a pro day to show that maybe his hands are a little bit better and that he can make his blocking assignments, because he was missing blocking assignments nonstop at the Senior Bowl, which was making me crazy as someone who wants to see that consistency. This is an unexciting tight end class.
Again,
like I said, Theo Johnson at Penn State, he was the fastest tight end all week at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, we got spoiled last year, I think, with tight ends.
We did.
We got a little bit too spoiled last year that I entered this year with too much hype, especially with a talent like Brock Bowers in the class highlighting it.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the consensus I see. Now, Joel, I want you to know that I love you for putting this segment into this chat of bringing up the defense, right? And listen, Nate here, a new IDP Plus member. let's talk about the defensive standouts. If there were any that you noticed, Jabril Cox is the talk of the town of what we hope to be the next great IDP linebacker and what he could be. Did you have any defensive standouts that you wanted to bring up? No. It's a weak.
I did not come prepared on the defensive side. See, IDP guys brought me in for the plus side, not the IDP side.
Sure. I was testing the waters. Of
course.
Out there. See, yeah, Jabril Cox is someone I will want to look out for, just for my fellow IDP people out there. And Andrew brought this up as well. I think this was with the tight end room. And honestly, could we go for a lot of them about the tight ends being top heavy this year? And yeah, I mean, we got Brock Bowers. He's a heavyweight.
But like the tier 2 guys didn't even show up at the Senior Bowl, right? Like Jatavian Sanders, Jaheim Bell. Were those guys weren't there, were they?
Jaheim Bell was there.
Okay.
He didn't make an impact on.
I was going to say, it must be fairly quiet if I didn't even know.
Yeah, exactly. The tight ends were not really featured very heavily in the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I feel like in past years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the combine has been the biggest source of rising for tight ends.
Yes,
we get to see guys that are, oh wow, he's big and he can run that. Or
Jelani Woods.
Yeah, Jelani Woods.
Yes. Oh, I love Jelani Woods.
It's not over yet. Yeah.
Not yet.
He missed the whole year with a hamstring injury, for God's sake.
I just keep getting flashbacks to my Brian Edwards takes. It's so bad. I can't get over it. I'm sorry. It's like Groundhog Day up there. But on the topic of the Senior Bowl, we talked obviously a lot about all the positions. So is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you think we should know about the Senior Bowl from this year?
I think we hit it all, man. All the players. And seriously, if you're in this industry, go to the Senior Bowl. If you live near Mobile and you're just a fan, go to the Senior Bowl. It's a blast. It's such a good time. The city of Mobile does an amazing job. Jim Nagy did just an incredible job. The whole committee does all of these amazing things. It's a great week with so many events. And there's nothing like the first night you're in Mobile and you go to this barbecue restaurant that your Uber driver told you about. This is the best. This is the best barbecue in Mobile. So you listen to them. And then you know it's the best barbecue in Mobile because you walk in and 30 seconds behind you, Tom Pelissero, Andrew Siciliano, and James Palmer walk in to eat dinner. And you're like, oh, they're here every year. If this is the first place they're going on Monday, this was the right call. So go to Mobile, go to Dreamland, enjoy the Senior Bowl. It's a great time. Great time.
You have sold me. I want you to know you have sold me. It's been one of those things that kind of like the expo for me. I really need people to convince me to go because I know I'll love it, but I just need that push, you know?
Oh, you have to go to the expo. I
went 2 years ago. Fantastic experience.
Oh, it's so much fun.
But I'm glad to see the Senior Bowl taking off so much as well. Easy B throwing a quick question in the chat as well. He does keep asking him, Easy. We always love seeing your questions. He has Laporte in a tight end premium. He has the 107. He's debating taking Bowers, doubling up on them. Is it smart or should he let it slide? And he adds in that he has, Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb, Puka Nacua, which is why he might pass on wide receiver, doubling at tight end.
And dude, it's tight end premium. Go for it.
Really good trio.
I'd do it. Honestly, I'd do it. If it's tight end premium, go for it. I think that's a smart call. Go after Bowers.
Joel, I know you're the big tight end premium one of at least of us two, so I'm curious on your take.
Yeah, I wonder if in a tight end premium if Bowers lasts that long, especially if you're in a heavy tight end premium, like 3/4 point, full point. He's probably not going to. He may not make it to 107, but if he did, I'm fully on board with starting a tight end in the flex.
Yeah.
I'm all good with that.
Yeah, I'd be definitely interested in that, and then also being content to listen to offers when that comes around. Bowers would be fantastic, and he's close to a can't miss type of prospect. Thank you. Occasionally I get the brain farts, but and you can get that, but someone else will want that more than you will want it, just because of the lack of need that you have and the luxury that you have of having Laporta as well as 3 dominant wide receivers. So you might be able to get a haul out of that, but you can be content taking Bowers either way.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that kind of wraps it up. We got that amazing question from Easy B here, and that wraps up our talk on the Senior Bowl. So Nate, I really want to thank you for joining us. This has been a blast for me, especially as a sports journalist, to get that first person perspective that you got. So thank you for joining us, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. This is a blast. Great way to spend a Sunday morning.
Yeah, and feel free to shout out your stuff too. One more time if you want to remind people where to.
Yeah. The easiest way to find me, guys, just find me on pretty much every social media platform: Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Facebook. I'm Nate Polvogt on all of them. FantasyPros featured writer. I'm going to have some fun stuff coming out this week. Dynasty Diehards on Razzball every Friday. You can find us on Razzball and Dynasty Diehards on YouTube and FF Dino Diehards on Twitter. And that's about it.
Perfect. And Joel, do you have any final remarks for our amazing listeners?
No, I just want to thank Nate for coming on. We'll catch up with you at the Expo this year, and looking forward to all your stuff. I do have to take exception, as we noted in our chat, that I watched your show with you and Mr. Chester and didn't have Jordan Love in your top 12 quarterbacks.
I know.
Almost turned it off immediately, but I kept.
I mean, that's fair.
I kept going.
That's
It's a great show. You guys do a great job.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, man.
If it makes you feel better, Joel, I was doing a quarterback ranking type of show the week before, and
I saw that show too.
Yeah, okay. I stood up.
You and Jorge, and I saw that too.
I stood up for your guy and my guy because I like him as well. Happy to see him working out. And thank you for joining in, Easy, as well.
Thanks, man.
All to Nate. That's awesome. Easy's
much
an
appreciated.
Where we love having Easy in our chat as well. But yeah, thank you for joining us, Nate. Thank you for all tuning in. It's been a fantastic show, and I hope it is helpful because this is one of those shows that I think you guys can bookmark, come back to, and really assess your film process yourself, and then compare it to what we talked about today with some of these great prospects with the 2024 NFL Draft. So make sure to follow Nate here, like you said, at Nate Polvogt, as well as myself at Michael__Sicoli. You can follow Joel here at the Joel Wirth. And obviously, you're watching on Club Fantasy FFL. So tune into at Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter. It's where you get to track all the amazing content that keeps on coming out on this amazing organization. We love it so much. So either way, we will see you next week, Sunday. You know how it goes. Remember, everybody, Dynasty, it's like a disco ball. Keeps on spinning year round, so join the club every single Sunday, now at 11 a.m. Eastern, right here at Club Fantasy. Stay healthy.